The door was wide open when the sun came up. Not unlocked. Not cracked. Open, like someone had run out in a hurry or didn't care if they ever came back. The breeze had knocked over the cactus she loved. Dirt everywhere. A single heel lay on its side by the ottoman. The ice in the glass she left behind had melted into a puddle that dripped methodically onto the corner of the rug we bought in Sedona. The fan was spinning on low, making that faint clicking sound it does when it needs tightening, the same sound she once said reminded her of old summer nights. And her laughter was still in the walls. The kind of laughter that doesn't belong to a woman you thought you understood. I could still hear it, even though it had stopped hours ago. On the kitchen counter was a wine glass. Lipstick stain, not her usual color. Next to it, a phone charger that didn't belong to either of us. And under the wine glass, the ring. Perfectly centered on a napkin that read, "Love is loudest when it leaves." No name, no signature, no explanation. Just that sentence, scribbled in blue pen, barely legible. The neighbor's dog barked once and then stopped. I stood in the middle of the living room, barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, and watched the ceiling spin like it could rewind the night if I stared long enough. I replayed everything. Her saying she needed time. Her saying it was just a weekend. Her suitcase already packed in the hallway before I even agreed. The friends I never met. The way she hesitated before hugging me goodbye. Like she didn't want to lie, but also didn't want to tell the truth. 3 nights. She said she'd be back Monday by noon. But now it was Sunday at dawn, and the silence in the house had already changed color. And I hadn't heard from her since Friday. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. No voicemail. Just a text. "You were never supposed to find out this way." That's when I sat down. On the floor. Right by the cactus, with dirt pressing into my palms. Because I finally understood what I was looking at. This wasn't a mistake. This was an exit. And I was the only one who hadn't realized we'd reached the end of something I thought was still in motion. What I didn't know then was her trip wasn't a getaway. It was a handoff, and I had just stumbled into the after-party. I didn't respond to the text. I just stared at it, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something less devastating. Something like, "Just kidding," or "Wrong number." But they stayed the same. Cold, final, and personal in a way that stung more than if she'd said my name. My hands were trembling, not the dramatic kind, more like a quiet shake, like my body knew before I did that something irreversible had just happened. I wanted to move, to get up off the floor, to make coffee, to distract myself with anything. But instead, I sat there for 15 full minutes, staring at the blinking cursor in the text field, wondering what the right response would even be. There wasn't one. So I stood up. I turned off the ceiling fan. I cleaned up the spilled dirt. I wiped the countertop like I was preparing for guests. Except the only thing coming was a truth I didn't ask for. Her laptop was still in the bedroom. She never traveled with it. Said it was her home brain, and she preferred to disconnect while she was away. I used to admire that. Now I realized it was probably because she had another device I didn't know about for her real life. Still, I opened the lid. The login screen blinked. I typed in her usual password, the name of our old cat. It worked, and that's when I found it. No secret folders. No suspicious emails. Nothing that screamed affair at first glance. But the browser history, that's where everything unraveled. There was a tab still open. A file-sharing platform. Basic layout. No logo. Just a login and a notification icon. One new file. Sunday morning. Final. I clicked. And I swear, the moment the video began playing, something inside me fractured so cleanly that I didn't even feel it at first. There she was, Sharon, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed in a robe I didn't recognize, holding a wine glass, laughing. But not alone. A man was off camera, talking. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, not since our early days. Flushed cheeks, real warmth, eyes lit up, and then she said something that dropped the bottom out of my stomach. She said, "He'll never leave. That's the thing about Lowell, he stays. Even when it's dead." The man laughed. She laughed harder. Then the camera panned. Just slightly. Enough to catch his reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize him. Tall. Clean cut. Wearing my bathrobe. My bathrobe. It wasn't just infidelity. It was mockery. It was comfort in her betrayal. Familiarity. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time oops. They knew each other well, and they knew me even better. The video ended with her raising her glass and saying, "To freedom." I slammed the laptop shut and walked into the bathroom. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I looked at myself in the mirror and realized something terrifying. I had no idea who she'd become. And worse, I had no idea when she became it. The text wasn't from her. I knew that now. It was from him, the man in the robe. He wanted me to know. Maybe guilt. Maybe gloating. I didn't care. All I knew was, she didn't expect me to see it. And once I did, nothing could go back to how it was. Not the ring. Not the couch we picked together. Not even the air in the house. And certainly not me. I'd spent years wondering if I was just too sensitive, too clingy, too soft. I used to apologize when she came home late, when I overcooked dinner, when I forgot to fold the towels her way. I tiptoed around her moods like they were landmines, all while convincing myself that was just compromise. But now, I finally saw it for what it was. I hadn't been living in a marriage. I'd been living in a performance. And I was the only one still clapping. There's a certain numbness that settles in after you've been humiliated in silence. Not the loud kind of betrayal, the movie kind, where you get to shout and slam doors and toss wedding rings into the ocean. No, this was quiet, domestic, like discovering the milk went sour a week ago and no one noticed. After watching that video, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't scream into the void. I just sat on the edge of the bed, hands gripping the mattress, trying to decide if I'd officially become a ghost in my own life. But something kept gnawing at me. The wine glass, the robe, the way she said my name like it was a punchline. Something about how familiar she looked in that moment. Like she'd rehearsed this. Like I was the only one still learning my lines in a play that had already ended its run. I opened her laptop again, this time with intention. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. I clicked through everything. Her folders, her bookmarks, her saved passwords. I felt like a stranger navigating the ruins of someone else's life. That's when I found it, a banking app one didn't recognize. She had never mentioned this one. Different logo, different color scheme. She always used her joint account, or so I thought. I clicked. It auto-logged in, and there it was, a secondary account, in her maiden name, with over $38,000 in it. $38,000. I stared at the number like it was printed in fire. There were transfers every 2 weeks, steady, mechanical, all routed from our joint account. Small amounts, disguised as wellness subscriptions, retreats, yoga charges, and all timed when I'd usually be working overtime or asleep. I scrolled through the transaction history. One stood out. It was labeled Maple Hollow Rental. I almost skipped it, but something about the name, Maple Hollow, clung to the back of my mind. I Googled it. Took a while. No direct hits. But then I found it buried in a travel blog from 2 years ago. A cabin. Secluded. No website. No social media. You had to know a guy to book it, apparently. She knew the guy, and she'd been there. Multiple times. With him. It was only a 2-hour drive. I told myself I wasn't going there to find her. I wasn't going to catch her red-handed. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to see. Just see it. The place where she smiled differently. Where she toasted to my absence. So I drove. Didn't even pack a bag. Just took the truck and an old thermos of cold coffee. The closer I got, the weirder the roads became. Dirt, then gravel, then just nothing. No signage. Just what's pressing in on either side like a secret trying to stay hidden. Then I saw it. Tucked between 2 trees, like it didn't want to be found. A small A-frame cabin with a red door and a car in the driveway. Not her car. His. I didn't get out. I didn't want to. My whole body went cold. Not scared. Just hollow. Like something inside me had stepped out first. But through the window, I could see movement. 2 figures. One with her posture. The way she tucks her hair behind her ear. The other, him. The same robe. The same grin. Laughing about something. Probably me. I drove off before they saw me. Maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't care. I wasn't there for confrontation. I wasn't even there for closure. I was there to understand. And I did. She hadn't just left. She had relocated. Emotionally. Logistically. Legally. This wasn't some mistake. It wasn't heat of the moment infidelity. It was a plan. A well-funded, carefully executed plan. And the worst part? I was part of it. The ATM, the cover story, the man she could count on to stay exactly where she left him. But I wasn't there anymore. And when she came home, she would learn that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes, it's the sound of someone making a decision you can't undo. She came back Monday, just like she said she would. Noon sharp, pulled into the driveway with that same relaxed posture she always had after a massage or a wine tasting. Her suitcase clunked against the steps like punctuation marks to a sentence I wasn't allowed to hear. I was parked 2 streets over, watching. I don't know why I didn't want to be inside when she returned. Maybe because I wanted to see it from the outside, how she behaved when she thought I'd just be waiting there like always, with some microwaved lunch or a polite question about her weekend. I wanted to observe the performance without being part of it. She walked up the steps, fished for her keys, opened the front door, and paused. Just for a second. That pause told me everything. Something was different, and she felt it. I had only taken the essentials. My clothes, a few photos, my old journals, some books. But I made sure to leave the furniture exactly where it had been. The dishes were washed, the curtains drawn. Everything was clean, unnaturally so. And yet, the house felt colder. I watched her stand in the doorway. She didn't call my name. She didn't check her phone. She just stood there, silent, still, like she was listening for something, some trace of me still echoing in the walls. But I had erased it all, carefully, quietly. That's when I finally got out of the truck and started walking toward the house. I didn't know what I was going to say. I wasn't ready for a fight. I didn't even want one. I was just tired of pretending I didn't know who she really was. When I stepped onto the porch, she was sitting at the dining table. Her suitcase was still by the door, unopened. She hadn't even taken her coat off. The ring, the one she'd left by the dishwasher, was on her pinky now, slipped on clumsily, too loose, like she wasn't sure which finger it had once belonged to. She looked up, not surprised, not angry, just calculating. "You moved out," she said, voice flat. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. This woman I'd shared a bed with, cried with, made plans with. She felt like a stranger wearing someone I used to love. "You lied," I said softly. Not an accusation, a statement. She didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough to leave," I replied. Her jaw tightened. She tapped the table once with her fingernail. The sound echoed. I could tell she wasn't prepared for this version of me. The one who didn't beg, who didn't fold. She had built an entire narrative around my predictability, my passivity, and I had just stepped outside of it. "I wasn't going to say anything," she murmured. "I thought maybe we could just pretend." I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "You toasted to my absence," I said. "I saw the video." Now she froze. Finally, the first crack. "You weren't supposed to," she stopped herself. "I wasn't supposed to matter," I corrected. "I wasn't supposed to notice. Wasn't supposed to ask questions. Just keep paying for everything while you planned your exit." She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was trying to block out the version of the story where I wasn't a fool. Then came the words I'll never forget. "I thought you'd stay, even after." That's when I realized it wasn't guilt she felt. It was disappointment. Not because she'd been caught, but because I didn't follow the script. She stood up, stepped toward me. "We could talk about this. There's still time to." "No," I interrupted. "There was time, and you spent it with someone else." She stared at me, silent. Her lips trembled, not with sorrow, but with frustration. Her plan had unraveled, not because I made a scene, not because I sought revenge, but because I simply left, and she had no idea what to do with that. I turned and walked toward the door. "I'll have the rest of my things picked up next week," I said, not looking back. "What do I tell people?" She called out. I stopped on the porch. "Tell them I finally listened to the silence." Then I left, not with anger, not with triumph, just with the truth, and that was enough. But what I didn't know was that she wasn't done, not even close, because 3 days later, I got an envelope in the mail, and what was inside changed everything I thought I understood about her weekend away. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, no markings, just my name, scribbled in shaky handwriting, as if someone was in a rush or too nervous to be neat. I almost threw it out, thinking it was another debt consolidation ad or some shady offer from a real estate flipper trying to buy the house I'd already abandoned. But when I held it up to the light, I could see the faint outline of a paperclip and something glossy. Photos. I opened it carefully, half expecting a court notice or some legal nonsense. Maybe even a final draft for Sharon. It wasn't from her. Not directly. Inside were 6 photographs. Printed. Matte finish. No digital watermark. No filter. No flare. Just raw, grainy snapshots that looked like they were taken from behind a tinted car window or through a narrow crack in a door. And they all had one thing in common. Her. Sharon. But not with the man I thought I knew about. Not with the rogue guy from the video. This was someone else entirely. Older. Balding. Familiar. Somehow, though I couldn't place him right away. The first photo showed them sitting in an outdoor cafe. Her hand was on his knee under the table. He was looking at her the way I used to, before I knew better. The second was them walking out of a grocery store together, carrying just one bag. Casual. Domestic. Like a real couple. The third photo made my stomach tighten. It was taken from inside the Maple Hollow cabin. Not outside, inside. Whoever took it had access. Sharon was sitting on the couch, leaning over the man, kissing him on the neck while he scrolled through something on a tablet. The fourth photo, and this is where the chill hit, showed her holding a document. I zoomed in. It was blurry, but I could make out the words property agreement at the top. And just beneath that, my name, my full legal name. I dropped the photo. My knees actually buckled, just for a moment, like my body knew before I did. Again, that something was very, very wrong. I went back to the photo. It wasn't a copy of her property agreement. It was mine. A document I signed 2 years ago when we refinanced the house in my name only, because her credit had tanked after a business failure. I remember the day vividly. She had forgotten to bring her ID, and I joked about how I was taking one for the team again. She laughed and kissed my cheek in the parking lot. And now she was holding that document in a cabin I hadn't even known existed until a week ago. The fifth photo was what triggered everything. It was a shot of that same older man. Not laughing, not casual, but standing next to a storage unit. One of those anonymous, beige row-style places out by the interstate. He was looking directly at the camera, or maybe past it. He wasn't smiling, and that's when it hit me. He wasn't unfamiliar. He was our old neighbor, Mr. Daltrey. I hadn't seen him in over 3 years. He'd moved out in the middle of the night after a family emergency, and Sharon barely blinked. Told me he was always a little off. Said she was glad to see him go. But in the photo, she was hugging him from behind, both of them grinning like a pair of teenagers. The last photo was an interior shot of a small room with cinderblock walls. One chair, one shelf. On the shelf was a safe. Taped to the back of the final photo was a sticky note that read, "She's not who you think. This is bigger than you know. Go to Unit 219. No signature, no number. Just that." I sat for over an hour staring at the stack of images, playing every year of our marriage in reverse in my head, rewinding moments that had seemed mundane at the time, but now rang with eerie clarity. The way she changed locks on the garage for security. The way she insisted on using her own tax guy. The sudden panic when I asked where her old journals had gone. The fake girls' trips. The shifted energy. The years of emotional withdrawal, dressed up as stress or fatigue. None of it was random. None of it was accidental. This wasn't just about a romantic betrayal anymore. It was something else. Something coordinated. Financial. Legal. Methodical. And I was at the center of it without knowing. I looked at the clock. 2:03 p.m. Then I grabbed my keys. I was going to Unit 219. Not because I wanted answers, but because I was done living in questions. The storage facility was on the edge of town, past the old train tracks and a shutter diner that still had faded open signs in the window, like time had forgotten to tell it the truth. I parked beside a dented vending machine that didn't seem to work and walked past rows of identical roll-up units, each one beige, impersonal, humming slightly in the wind. It was cold that day, not winter cold, but the kind of chill that makes your hands dry and your nerves sharper. Unit 219 was halfway down the third row. It looked like all the others, padlocked, dusty, silent. But I had a code. Not from Sharon. From the envelope. It was written on the back of one of the photographs in invisible ink. I discovered it by accident earlier that morning, brushing my thumb across the corner. I'd borrowed a UV pen light from my neighbor, pretending I was trying to check for mold on old documents. The code was 7 digits long. I typed it into the keypad on the side of the lockbox, expecting a red error light. But instead, a beep. Green light. Click. The door rolled up slowly, groaning against years of stillness. And there it was. Not chaos. Not mess. Not stacks of forgotten boxes or tools. Order. A single chair set in the center of the unit. Next to it, a plastic storage bin with a red lid. Everything else, empty space, concrete walls, a hanging bulb on a chain above, flickering slightly like it hadn't been used in years. But it had. The dust patterns on the floor were disrupted, as if someone had walked in a circle here many times. Someone deliberate. Someone who didn't want to leave a mess, but wasn't hiding either. I sat down in the chair. I don't even know why. Maybe I just wanted to feel stable. Or maybe I expected something to happen when I did. Nothing happened, so I reached for the red box. It wasn't locked, just sealed with a strip of worn duct tape. Inside were documents. Dozens. Folders with labels like Joint Holdings, pre-2018. Lowell, Passive Account Summary. IRA Conversions, Authorization Signed. JNR Consulting, Shell Activity. Backup Marriage License, Illinois. I blinked. Read that last one again. Backup Marriage License. I pulled it out, and there it was, Sharon's name and someone else's. Not mine. Dated 2 years ago. Filed. Stamped. Not official, but pre-filled, prepared, notarized. And at the bottom, a forged signature. My name. Someone was preparing to become me, or prove I'd agreed to something I hadn't. At the very bottom of the box was an envelope labeled for after. Inside, a flash drive and a letter. Not typed. Handwritten. The letter read, Lowell, if you're reading this, it means you've finally started asking questions. I told her this would fall apart, but she said you wouldn't notice. That you were too gentle, too loyal, that you'd forgive anything if she cried at the right moment. She underestimates you. The truth is, this wasn't just about the affair. It was never just that. You're listed on too many things she needs to clear. This was a removal. Quiet. Painless. Legal. But someone had to tell you before it was too late. Plug in the drive. Don't go to the police yet. You'll see why. No name. Just that. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like I couldn't hear the silence around me anymore. I pocketed the drive, replaced everything exactly as I found it, closed the unit, and locked it. By the time I got back to the truck, I could barely steady my hands on the wheel. Sharon wasn't just cheating. She had built a parallel existence, and part of that plan involved phasing me out. Not violently, not suddenly, just erasing me, quietly, neatly, on paper. She was preparing to prove I didn't exist in the way I thought I did, that our marriage was a footnote, that I was a technicality, a financial hinge she needed to undo before she became whoever she planned to be next. And that flash drive, that was the key to everything. The moment I plugged it into my old laptop, the screen flickered once, then opened a folder automatically. No password, no prompt, just one single folder named Exit Stages. Inside it were subfolders, each named with dates, most of them months or even years ago. The first one dated back to before our 7th anniversary. I clicked on the most recent folder. A video started playing, and that's when everything I thought I understood about Sharon, about us, disintegrated. She was sitting at a table across from the man from the earlier photos. Not the one in the robe, the other man. Mr. Daltrey, my former neighbor. But this wasn't a casual moment. It was clearly filmed intentionally with a static camera, angled perfectly. She was wearing a formal jacket. Her expression, controlled, composed, like she was testifying. Then she started speaking, not to the man, to the camera. To whoever's watching this, she said, this is confirmation that the timeline has been followed as instructed. I froze. The man nodded, adjusting a folder in front of him. Do you acknowledge that financial transition from Lowell Patrick Whitner is now 70% complete? Yes, she replied, with the final phase beginning this month. What about contingency coverage in case of legal interference? We've shifted accounts. He's not aware. His behavior is still passive. Risk is low. My ears were ringing. There was no emotion in her voice. No hesitation, just strategy, calculation, as if I were a project, a file on a hard drive, something to phase out. The man leaned in slightly. And if he resists? A pause. Then she said, I'll do what's necessary. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. I stood up, stumbling backward, knocking over the kitchen chair behind me. I'd seen enough. More than enough. She was planning to erase me from more than just the house. From records. From accounts. From memory. But then I saw one more file in the folder. A PDF. I opened it because something in me needed the full picture, even if it crushed me. It was titled Phase 4, Psychological Closure Strategy. It was a script, a literal script, lines she'd written or someone had written for her, outlining things she was supposed to say in order to destabilize me emotionally. Talking points like, I need to find myself. You deserve someone more present. I'm just not the same woman anymore. Please don't make this harder than it is. I remembered every single one of them. She had said all of them, word for word. I thought they were spontaneous, raw, honest. They were rehearsed. It wasn't a breakup. It was a psychological exit plan, and I'd walked right into it with open arms, thinking I was being supportive. I sat down slowly, as if gravity had doubled in the room. Everything was upside down. All the fights, the cold nights, the strange apologies, the sudden overcompensation, it had all been architecture. A slow dismantling of trust, sanity, and self. She wanted me confused, paralyzed, afraid to ask questions. And it worked. Until now. Because here I was, staring down the final act of a plan I was never meant to survive intact. Emotionally, financially, or personally. But here's what she didn't know. The flash drive didn't just contain her files. It had more. Because someone who knew what she was doing had embedded a second folder buried deep in the metadata. It was labeled, in case he makes it through. And what I found inside that wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon. And the one thing that could finally end all of this. I sat there in silence, hands hovering over the keyboard, staring at the folder titled, In case he makes it through. That sentence, it didn't just suggest someone was rooting for me. It suggested someone believed I'd survive this. I opened it. Inside were 3 items, a video, a PDF, and a plain text note. I clicked the video first. The screen lit up with a face I hadn't expected. Delia, one of the supposed girls' trip friends, the one Sharon always named, but I'd never met. Until now. She looked older than I imagined, with gray streaks in her hair and a voice that carried both weariness and regret. Lowell, she said gently, if you're seeing this, it means I've finally done the right thing. She took a breath, like the words were heavy. I was part of it. Not first. But later, when I found out what Sharon was planning, I didn't stop her. I helped her set up shell accounts. I helped her lie. I even helped her scout that cabin, Maple Hollow. I justified it, told myself it wasn't my life. But I knew, and I let it happen. She looked away for a second, blinking tears. But then I realized something. She wasn't just leaving you. She was trying to break you, piece by piece. And no one deserves that. Not even someone as quiet, as gentle, as loyal as you. She leaned in. I copied everything. I backed it up. I found your work email one day, but I couldn't bring myself to send it. So I mailed it instead, anonymously. I didn't expect you to make it this far, but I'm glad you did. Then she said something that stuck with me. You're not weak. You're whole. You were never the problem. The video ended. I sat still for a long time. Not because I was stunned, I think I had moved past that, but because for the first time in years, I felt something strange and foreign in my chest. Clarity. I opened the PDF next. It was a full documentation of every transfer, fake signature, and false legal move Sharon had orchestrated. Not just against me, but against others too. Apparently, I wasn't the first, just the most compliant, the easiest target. But the file also included one more thing, instructions. How to take the documentation to a fraud investigator. What steps to take to protect myself. A roadmap back to myself. And finally, the text note. Just one line. Sometimes survival is the best revenge. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed like I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The next morning, I walked into a legal aid office with the flash drive, the photos, the letter, and a quiet fire in my chest. I didn't want to ruin Sharon. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted the truth to exist somewhere other than my own head. They listened. They believed me. They started the process. In the weeks that followed, the power shifted. The house was put under review. Her accounts were frozen. The fraudulent documents were nullified. And I was free, not just legally, emotionally, personally, psychologically. For the first time in over a decade, I woke up and didn't feel like I was tiptoeing through my own life. I rented a cabin, not to hide, but to restart. Different state, quiet town. I didn't bring much with me. Just a few clothes, a worn-out novel I never finished, and an old record player that still crackled when I played it. I started painting again, just for me. Bad landscapes, messy colors. But every brushstroke felt like a chapter one had reclaimed. One evening, while watching the trees sway outside the window, I thought about everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the unraveling. And I realized something I never thought I would. I was grateful. Because she left, I found myself again. Because she lied, I learned to listen to my instincts. Because she tried to erase me, I began to write the story of who I really am. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need her approval, her presence, or her permission. I was enough. I am enough. And I'm still here. Not as a victim, but as someone who finally remembered how to live.